Hello and welcome to our tutorial on putting together a very basic database. A database, again, can be very small or very extensive, but any way you slice it, the world nowadays runs on data. In this example, we're going to keep it very simple. We're just going to do a very basic address list. So what I've done is I've just opened up a blank Excel worksheet, and as you can see, I've put these titles across the top. And when we talk about databases, we refer to these as field names, by the way. These are just labels for the columns of data to let you know what's inside of each column. Beneath this set of field names is I've just inserted my own address, and this is what we call a data record. You can think of a data record as basically being a single line of information. Data records can have blank cells with them, but try to avoid, if at all possible, completely blank lines within your database. Usually they just end up causing problems and they have to be cleaned up one way or the other. You may have noticed as well that I've bolded this set of field names, and again, you just highlight the cells and click your bold button up there. And the reason I did that is because generally if you bold the text up at the top, it makes it easier for other applications and other programs to understand that that is your header row, that if you do any sorts or changes or anything like that, it doesn't get mixed in with the data. And more importantly, if you use your database in Excel to do things like merge processes with Microsoft Word, it allows programs like Microsoft Word to understand that this stuff in here are going to be the actual connections between this table of data and anything like form letters and labels that you might make. We have a tutorial on doing a mail merge a little bit later, so take a look at that and you'll probably get a better idea of what I'm talking about. In this instance as well, I've added my address in, and you can see already I have a little bit of a problem because this has been kind of cut off. Again, you can always come up here and click and drag, or simply double click the split between the letters representing the columns, and that just widens it out, and you'll be doing that a fair amount when you're putting stuff into your database. Now, a couple of things I'd just like to bring up. First and foremost, I'm not going to put you through the nightmare of watching me have to type data in. I'm all about getting data in much quicker than, just typing. Of course, you're going to be forced to do that, but let's not waste time by having you observe me. What I want to talk about, though, is incorporating data from other sources nice and quickly. So for instance, if I just go and I'm going to go and take a look through here, and I have another document. I have a Friday address list, totally different address book. I'm going to go and open that one up. And when that one pops open, you'll note it doesn't even have the same headings at the top, but that really doesn't matter. As long as the data layout is within a table, I can simply go and copy this. I'm using the key combination of Control-C on my keyboard to do that. And I'm just going to jump back to my other address list here, click in a cell and do a Control-V, and that's just going to pop that data in there. As well, I'm going to go in and once again do a little bit of column widening here, just to make sure everything can be seen. The wonderful thing about this database is that it is in a table, and it doesn't matter whether it's an Excel database or Access or any other brand of database. Most databases use tables as their main storage framework or main storage containers. This really works very well for us because this allows us to go to totally different programs or apps, and as long as the data is in a table, we can easily copy it and paste it into Excel. So down here I also have a Word document, and in this case it's kind of set up the same way my Excel document is. So I'm just going to come along in here and I'm just going to highlight the cells that I need, and I'll do the same thing. I'll do a Control-C to copy it. And when I come along back to my address list, I'll click in an empty cell and I'll go Control V to paste it in. Now, what you're going to find is with Microsoft Word, sometimes you have to come in and do some cleanup. For instance, it's brought my border lines along. So I'm just going to go and highlight these items, and I'm going to come along and say no borders. And what's nifty is I can also come along and I can click and drag to readjust these items, just to clean it up a little bit. And I also see I have to widen out a column in here as well. There we go. So that's looking nice and clean. By the way, you may have noticed as well, I've used address 1 and address 2 up here at the top. And as you can see, I only do that so the building name, if someone lives in a building, will be on a separate line than the address on something like a mailing label or a letter. So usually if you can kind of keep individual chunks of data in their requisite columns, that's just going to work much easier. So for instance, that's why it's really nice to keep first and last names in separate columns. You'll find if someone sends you a sheet of data with the two things combined, that can sometimes pose a problem. In a later tutorial, we'll talk about splitting up columns if that's the case. Now, if you are working with Excel and working with let's say a different database entirely, you might find that the only thing, depending on how the database is set up, that you can have access to are exports out of the database, data that's exported out. And very commonly, data that is exported out ends up being in what's called comma-separated values, kind of basically a text file. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to show you what it might look like. So I have a thing here called database export. If I just double click on it, Notepad pops open, and here's the data separated by commas. Now, you can take this through an import wizard to break things up, but what I'm going to do, I'll just show you a slightly different method here. I'm going to come along to Excel, jump back to my address list. I'm going to actually open up a new document for a second, just another blank workbook. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go File, Open, and I'm going to go looking for that database export. Now, I can go and browse. So in this instance, I'll click on Database Export. I will click Open, and it will automatically start the wizard for me. Now in this case, I have to make a choice between delimited and fixed width. Now delimited says characters such as commas or tabs separate each field. And in this case, yes, commas are separating them. So I'm going to choose delimited. There are no headers in here, so I'm not going to check off my data has headers. But I'll go ahead and I'll click Next. And it asks, what is the data separated by? And the data in this case is separated by commas. I'm going to take the tab off. So you'll notice that as soon as I've selected comma, it has broken everything into columns. I click Next. And in this instance, I'm allowed the opportunity to label these different columns, but I'm going to leave it as general. General says it converts numeric values to numbers, data values to dates, and all remaining values to text. And that's going to work just fine for me. So if I go ahead and I click Finish, all of a sudden that data is in a lovely little table, and everywhere there was a comma, it gets broken into a separate column. And as usual, I have to double click a little bit here and widen out these columns. In turn, I can go and highlight the text and either copy it or use Control X to cut it out of the sheet. I'm just going to do a quick copy here. And I'm going to go back to my address list. I'm going to click on an empty space, do a Control V to paste it in, And there I've got myself a lovely little address database. And the wonderful thing about this little address database is if I want to come in here nice and quick and kind of filter it, all I have to do is click up here in the field names or the header row at the top. And if I go up to my data tab, I can click on the filter button. Suddenly I get filtering drop downs in all of these headings. And I can, for instance, if I want to filter out my Calgary contacts, I can click the down arrow and I can take the selection away from select all, choose only Calgary. I can click OK and I only get my Calgary records returned to me. Now, if I want to take this back to where it was, you'll notice that any field name that I've filtered by, the moment I filter it, it gets a little funnel as its icon beside it. So if I click on the little funnel and I say clear the filter from city, it brings everything back. So I'm just going to go ahead, since I took so much time to compose this address list, and I'm going to go ahead and save it.